Hello, everyone. This is Kerwin, and welcome to another episode of What's Happening in Travel with Kusho and Kerwin. And I am Kerwin, and Kusho is not here today. Today's episode, we're going to talk about two things. There have been a lot going on in the news about two particular items. And so I'm going to try to address those in this podcast. To give you a little background, when I worked for the airline industry, I used to work I started working on a ramp when I was in Washington, D.C. And one of my jobs was to clean the airplane. And so one of the things that my nemesis on the planes was Fruit Loops. And because what would happen is that the parents would give their kids Fruit Loops, and when they leave the plane, there are Fruit Loops everywhere. Um, and it made your job a little more difficult to clean up Fruit Loops. And one of the things that always bugged me was, if you're a parent, why would you allow your kids to throw the Fruit Loops all over the plane? I mean, it's not like, if you do it at home, that's fine, but this is a public space, right? You wouldn't go to an airport and have your kids throw stuff all over the place, or you wouldn't go to a concert. But anyway, beside the point. But just to give you the background of all that. And our job was to clean the airplane after it came in, so it was ready and nice and clean for the next customers to go out. And one of the things that I've noticed is that whenever I fly and I'm getting off a plane, oh my God, it's terrible. Um, because, especially on long haul flights, right? People have been on these planes for so long, and they've eaten, they've done all kinds of stuff. It's a mess. So the story that's out there is, and the internet is extremely interesting because you get one item and then people go off on a tangent. So this is what I think he's a major league, I think he's a baseball player. And he tweeted, flight attendant at United just made my 22-week pregnant wife traveling with a 5-year-old and 2-year-old get on her hands and knees to pick up the popcorn mess. My youngest daughter. Are you kidding me? Oh, the popcorn mess by my youngest daughter. Are you kidding me? Question mark, exclamation sign, question mark, exclamation sign. So he posted this. And I think at the time of reading this, there are 1,647 retweets, 17.6 thousand quote in the tweets, and 12.4 thousand likes. And the comments just keep coming and coming and coming. So some people are like, well, it's your child, you should clean it up because your child made the mess. And others are like, well, the airline should. Now, when I got this, as an airline geek, the picture that's posted is of the two little girls, and they're sitting in a two side of an airplane, and there are only two seats. So what this tells me is, yeah, there are only two seats. So it tells me that this is a United Express carrier. Don't know which one it is, because they only have two seats. And the smaller planes, the regional jets, are the ones that have two seats. Either it be the Embraers, i.e. the 145. This does not look like a 145 seat. So I think it's probably a 175. Embraer ERJ 175 is my, if I had to guess, which one it was, just based on how it looks. So there are two seats. So it looks like the girls had, I don't know if they had their two seats, because the other one is over two. And if she's over two, it's their 5 and 2-year-old. So the 5-year-old would have to have a seat, and the 2-year-old would actually have to have their own seat. And mom would have to have a seat on the other side. So this is kind of weird, because I don't know if you would have your 2-year-old sitting by themselves despite the fact that they need to have their own seat because the airline requires, if the child is over 2, they need to have their own seat. So, and mom will be sitting across. So I'm confused by this. Now, one of the things with this is she's 22 weeks pregnant, he said, and she's traveling with 2 small children, 1 2 and 1 5. I would think you need an assistant because you're so far ahead pregnant. And it's 2 little girls. I mean, they're still toddlers, so you're gonna have to lift at least a 2-year-old at some point because she's gonna be, I'm not walking, and you're gonna have to lift her at some point. So it just seems to me that she needed help in any case, but that's beside the point, right? Now, the message that he tweeted is not necessarily the message that she sent him. Also, the message that she sent him is not necessarily the message that the flight attendant said. I don't know what the flight attendant said because this is like the second person who is saying what happened. So I don't know what happened. All I know is that there's a photo of the kids sitting in the seat and there's popcorn all over the floor. On these regional jets, it's the flight attendants that ends up, what they do, if you've never flown one of the regional jets, is, and sometimes depending on how, so you could have one flight attendant, if it's one for every 50 seats. And so if this is a 50-seater, then there's only one flight attendant. Otherwise, it'll be 2 because it'll go up to like 70 something seats, and then they'll have 2 because you have to have one for every 50 seats, regardless of the fact if anyone's sitting in those seats. And so there's probably 1 or 2 flight attendants on this particular airplane. And what they would do, they'd walk through with a bag, just like you see them doing right on the bigger flights, and they're like, hey, here's your trash, throw your stuff in here. And then when they get to the gates, depending on how dirty the airplane are, someone will come in and do some cleaning. I don't know how the airplanes are cleaned these days because I've been in airplanes where they're still dirty, which tells me that no one cleaned them. So I bring my own wipes and I clean the airplanes myself, clean my seat and my everything, because I know they're not being cleaned properly. So there's a lot of questions here, and I'm not taking up for either side, but I think that if you're traveling with 2 little kids and the kids make a mess, you are the one that's supposed to clean it up. You can't expect people to clean up the mess that you're making, especially on an airplane. Yes, she's 22 weeks pregnant, but she's also traveling with a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old. So if she wasn't able to travel with these children, then she shouldn't be traveling, or she should have somebody to help her, is what I'd say. But the comments are, some people are like, well, oh, and of course United chimed in and said, which is standard, give me the number and the information and we'll look into it, which is standard for any airlines. So some people said, won't lie, the fact that the flight attendant had the guts to make the passenger clean their own mess kind of makes me want to fly United more. People say, who do you expect to clean up the mess? And he said, well, the cleaning crew that they hire. I've flown enough airports, charters for Delta to know that pro athletes have no respect for airline crews and the aircraft, grow up and behave. Then I have, a good parent would have taught their kids to pick up and be respectful to others. You clearly don't have kids, so sit this one out. I see a cleaning crew enter the plane every time I get off the plane. You don't think other people spill things, or you think everyone cleans up after themselves when they do? So people have all kinds of comments because, one, they've probably never flown on an airplane, and it's Twitter, right? So everybody has their own opinion. But just from the logistics standpoint, one, we don't know exactly what happened because this is the wife telling the husband something, and then the husband tweeted. I don't know if he just, I don't know what happened. But if you're on a plane and you make your mess, you should clean it up. If you, I mean, I've flown 189 airlines, and yes, I was on a flight where I had gum, because I sat on gum, and that's because the airline didn't clean that seat before. And I told the flight attendant, she brought some stuff over, and I cleaned it up. And it's not even my mess. And you know, I wrote something to the airline, and she wrote a note, and I've gotten zero compensation. You know, so it's not a matter of taking up for the airline, because I've had my share of mishaps, but just trying to explain to you, people are super nasty, and if you make the mess, you should clean up that mess. Don't leave your mess behind and expect somebody else to clean it. If it's like a biohazard, like in that case, luckily I had gloves, so I took my gloves out and I cleaned it up off, because it was on my clothing. But typically, if it's a biohazard, they have little bio kits. Like if somebody vomits or something like that, then they will come out with gloves, and they have a little kit that can clean that up. And just so you know, if there's actually vomit on an airplane, or just vomit in general, if you use coffee grounds and put on it, the coffee grounds just gel everything together, and it also gives off a nice odor. So that smell of the stuff that came out of your stomach is gone, because the coffee grounds take that up. I had to use that a few times when it was my job to clean up people's mess. So as somebody who's been on both sides of the fence, if you make a mess in an airplane, clean it up. I mean, I get it that this lady is advanced pregnancy, but tell your kids. I mean, the kids are 2 and 5; they can pick it up. You know, I mean, just tell them, hey, you just threw the stuff on the floor, pick it up, and the kids will pick it up. You know, you just have to train your kids. So what do you think? I mean, in a situation like this, I mean, what do you think? I mean, what do you think should have happened? What have you seen when you've flown? So that's our first story. So the next story is about children again. And this one, so like I said, I've been in 189 airlines, and I've flown, you know, millions of miles. And this one is quite interesting because it's about a crying baby. And now before I tell you this crying baby story, I was on a flight from New York to, actually, I was back in there when it was New York to Moscow. And then it was from Moscow to, and I think, is it New York to Moscow? Yes, because it was actually an Aeroflot. And I was connecting from then I was going to do Moscow to Berlin. And they had a special fare, because it was a flight would go to Moscow, and then it would go from Moscow to Tel Aviv. Was it Moscow? Trying to remember where it was, but I think it was Aeroflot, so it had to be. But there was a special fare. And when we were landing, there was a lot of babies on this flight. And I actually asked the flight attendant, I said, you know, how many babies are on this flight? And she said, there are 50 babies on this flight. And basically every mom, almost every mom that came on had two kids. There's either one in the hand or one in tow, and so and it was really noisy on the flight, and we're landing. And I don't know if you understand how, if you've never flown, you probably wouldn't understand, but when the airplane is landing, your body is adjusting to the pressure, that you have an altitude and the pressure when you get below 10,000 feet. And so your ears are trying to adjust. Now, as we're older, we adjust easier, but the children, they don't know what to do. So because what you do, you either hold your nose and blow, or if you have gum, you can chew gum, or you can drink something. Now, typically you're landing, so you usually don't have anything that you can drink. But if you hold your nose and blow, or you swallow, then that will help to equalize the pressure in your ears. But children, they don't know what to do. So typically what moms will do is that they'll either feed them if they have a bottle handy, or they'll breastfeed them, because the sucking motion will relieve the pressure in their ears. And so these kids were just crying on landing. And it was so interesting because it sounded like an orchestra, because you'd hear one kid over here crying, and then another kid over here crying, and then another one over here crying. So it was quite interesting. And so I tell you this because I've had my share of babies crying on airplanes, and babies are going to cry. They don't know what to do. They're young. And so this story, it says, it's on Yahoo. It says plane passengers escorted from Florida flight after erupting over crying baby. And so it says an angry plane passenger has been recorded shouting about a crying baby on a Southwest flight to Florida in a video shared on TikTok by a fellow passenger. The video has now been viewed over 168,000 times and shows him repeatedly shouting and swearing at the flight attendant. The social media post is titled "Belligerent Passenger Causes Diversion," and leads with the introduction caption, "Stuck in a holding pattern for weather." And the Southwest passenger loses his mind over a baby. In the video, the camera initially faces the passenger filming the scene, and viewers can see a group of flight attendants over his shoulder. A man raising his voice in the background is heard saying that the child had been crying for over 40 minutes. Passenger then pleads with flight attendants to stop the screaming because he was sleeping, asking, "Calm the child down, please." After the man is heard becoming increasingly annoyed, the flight attendants ask him to stop screaming. "I'm not screaming. You want me to scream?" he responds, and uses some expletives. He then continues to swear profuse, and the camera pans back to the passenger filming, who laughs and then looked amused. Meanwhile, a baby can be heard crying loudly throughout. When one of the flight attendants signals to a colleague and says they need to call authorities, the passenger raises, "You can't do that," expletives, wearing a expletive can with the baby, and it just goes on, right? So there's a conversation between the flight attendant and the passenger. They're trying to calm the passenger down. Looks like the guy didn't get the message that things were gonna get crazy. And so looks like they end up diverting somewhere. And they yelled him off. They let him off the plane. And followers were quick to comment underneath the video, and some people sympathize with the passenger. "I'm a parent and I understand this frustration, blah, 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 blah." But what's going to happen is when you fly, there's a lot of things that's going to be going on, right? And I know there are delays. I think in the last episode, I spoke about the lady who was denied boarding because she was drunk, because she had one Bloody Mary, she said. But she was a little out of it. Maybe she's a light drinker, but she's a little out of it. But things like this, things like these are going to happen. You are going to have babies crying on an airplane, because that's what happens. It's a public transportation. It is not your private jet. So you are going to have, things like that happening. But it's humanity. I mean, it's a child crying. I'm sure the parent doesn't go, "Hey, kid, start crying now." I mean, that doesn't happen, right? What I've seen some parents do is, like once I was in Santiago, Chile, going Santiago to Newark years ago, and this mother was running her little son ragged all around the terminal. And the little boy was about to pass out, and she said, "No, no, no, let's go, let's go." And she said she's trying to get him tired, so when he gets on the flight, he'll sleep all the way through. Sure enough, he was sitting like a row in front of me, and he slept all the way through. I mean, I've had children who've falling asleep on my shoulder on a flight. I think I was going from Abu Dhabi to JFK and Etihad. It's like a 13-hour flight. And this kid was asleep on my shoulder for maybe 8 hours. Mom didn't even say anything during the whole time. And, probably not as long, but it was for a long time. The kid was sleeping on my shoulder. Mom didn't even take her own child and say, sleep on my shoulder instead. She was just doing her own thing the whole time while the child was sleeping. So oftentimes when you fly, things are gonna happen. But it's kind of how you deal with it. And for crying out loud, if you throw something on the floor, pick it up. There's a barf bag in front you can put stuff in. Or call the flight attendant and say, hey, I threw something on the ground. Can I get something to help to clean it up? But it is your job to keep, the area that you are. You're in a public place, for crying out loud. It's not your living room. So that's the two stories I have for this week about passenger behavior on airplanes. If you have any comments at all on either of these stories, or you've had your own experience of passengers behaving badly on airplanes, feel free to leave a comment and let me know. So this is Kerwin with pastor.rather.com, cruising out through the coming a new site, called lieflatseats.net, which tells you all about lay flat seats. So go take a look at that and let me know what you think. We'll talk soon and have a good flight.